The scream hit the air before anyone understood where it came from, a sharp, trembling cry that cut through the muted hush of the cemetery. It came from a woman in a white maternity dress stumbling forward as her knees buckled, her breath breaking in painful bursts. Gravestones blurred in her vision while mourners in black stepped back, startled and unsure whether to intervene. And in that breathless, suspended moment, a single father named Rowan Hale dropped the roses he was carrying for his late brother and rushed toward her, instinct crushing grief as he caught her just before she hit the wet grass. Her hands clutched at her stomach, and for a terrifying second, Rowan felt the whole world tilt, as if he were holding not just a collapsing stranger, but the fragile hinge on which fate itself swung. If you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances, viewers of Ripple of Love, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Rowan had come to the funeral alone except for his young son, Mason, who clung to his hand with a quiet solemnity far beyond his 8 years. The boy had learned grief early when cancer stole his mother, and he watched now with wide eyes as his father cradled the pregnant stranger with a gentleness that spoke of a man who knew too well how easily life could shatter. The sky above was an iron gray that pressed down on everything, thick with the scent of rain and soil, and Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with weather as he lifted the woman to a nearby stone bench. Her long blonde hair spilled down her shoulder like a curtain across her pale face, and for a moment Rowan feared he had arrived too late to help. He whispered steady breaths, forcing himself not to panic, the way he used to when Mason was an infant and nights felt endless. The woman blinked slowly, trying to focus on the world around her, and Rowan noticed how the wind tugged at the hem of her dress, making her appear almost weightless despite the heavy curve of her belly. The funeral procession resumed around them, though eyes kept drifting their way in quiet curiosity. Rowan didn't care. His thoughts were trapped between the fear that she might be in labor and the brutal ache of standing in the same burial ground where he'd said goodbye to the two people he loved most in his life. Her breathing eventually steadied, and Rowan felt the tremor in his hands settle a little. He guided her to sit upright, supporting her shoulders as she leaned against him for balance. He asked if she was hurt, if she was alone, if there was someone he could call. She only managed a faint shake of her head, her gaze drifting toward a distant gravestone adorned with fresh lilies. Rowan recognized the hollow look in her eyes. It was the expression of someone standing on the wreckage of a life she once believed she had more time to love. As other mourners gathered in small clusters, Rowan kept watch over her, all while Mason sat at his side silently, his small hand resting on the woman's wrist as if offering his own form of comfort. Finally, she whispered her name, Aria, and Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. Aria. A name that sounded soft enough to bruise if spoken too harshly. She told him she was attending her uncle's funeral, the only family who had stood by her when her boyfriend abandoned her at the news of her pregnancy. She hadn't eaten that morning, grief twisting her stomach until she felt faint, and now she felt embarrassed for collapsing at such a moment. Rowan assured her it was nothing to be ashamed of. Grief had a way of stripping even the strongest people down to raw bone. The hours that followed were a quiet blur. He insisted on walking her home after the service, refusing to leave her alone though she insisted she would be fine. Mason held her hand on the way, more protective than Rowan expected, and Aria seemed oddly comforted by the child's gentle presence. Her home was a small rented cottage at the edge of town, white paint peeling at the corners, the front garden overgrown from neglect. Rowan sensed the loneliness woven into the walls before they even stepped inside. He helped her to the couch, offered to make tea, tidied scattered items on the floor, anything to ease the heaviness pooling in the room. Aria watched him with an expression he couldn't place, not gratitude exactly, but a kind of wary disbelief, as if kindness had become foreign currency to her. She asked why he cared. Rowan didn't know how to answer. Maybe because he'd been saved once by a stranger on the worst day of his life, when Mason had been 5 months old and Rowan had nearly drowned in grief. Maybe because he couldn't bear the thought of someone collapsing under a burden he recognized too well. Maybe because she simply looked like someone who deserved gentleness after being denied it too long. When Arya fell asleep on the couch, exhaustion stealing over her in slow waves, Rowan left a note with his number in case she needed anything. He didn't expect to hear from her again. He certainly didn't expect what came next. Just a few hours later, as dusk washed the town in soft blue light, Rowan received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. A lawyer's voice crackled through, asking if he had been the man who assisted Arya at the funeral. Rowan confirmed, slightly confused. The lawyer explained that Arya's uncle, the man they had buried, had been a profoundly wealthy philanthropist. In the final months of his life, he had admired Rowan from afar, having seen him around town as a single father struggling with quiet resilience. He had been moved by Rowan's tenderness toward Mason, by the way he worked long shifts at a hardware store yet still found time to coach youth sports, volunteer at the community center, and show compassion even on days when grief weighed heavy on him. Arya's uncle had left a clause in his will, the lawyer said, granting a massive inheritance to someone who embodied genuine kindness without expectation. Someone who lived love instead of merely speaking it. He had made the choice long before he died, but witnessing Rowan rush to help Arya at the funeral had been the final confirmation he needed. Rowan stood frozen as the words sank in. He was inheriting $500 million. The phone nearly slipped from his fingers. He felt the room tilt the same way it had earlier at the cemetery, as if life had shifted on its axis without warning. Mason looked up at him from the kitchen table, wiping jelly from his chin, unaware of how drastically their world had just changed. Rowan felt tears sting his eyes, but not from excitement, from disbelief, from fear of unworthiness, from the overwhelming weight of a blessing he had never asked for and never dreamed could belong to him. That night he sat in silence long after Mason fell asleep, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter of rain beginning outside. He had known hardship for so long that hope felt like a foreign language. He wondered if he deserved such a gift. He wondered what to do next, how to honor the man who had believed in him simply because of the way he cared for others. He wondered about Arya, vulnerable, grieving, alone in a too-quiet house, and whether this twist of fate might also be a bridge toward healing for both of them. As the story nears its end, dear viewers, if it has touched your heart, please support it so more people can experience these moments of compassion. Before we reach the final emotional conclusion, please leave a comment sharing how this story made you feel. Rowan decided that the inheritance would not change his heart, only widen its reach. He returned to Arya's cottage the next morning with groceries, not money, with breakfast, not explanations. She opened the door looking rested yet fragile, her eyes softening when she saw Mason clutching a small bouquet of dandelions he had picked for her. In that moment, Rowan realized the inheritance wasn't the reward, this connection, this newfound purpose, this gentle unfolding of healing between two broken souls was the true gift. The money would help him build a stable life for Mason, support Arya through the rest of her pregnancy, and honor a man who had believed in goodness even when the world turned dark. And as sunlight broke through the clouds behind them, Rowan understood that sometimes life waits until you are at your most vulnerable to show you the unexpected beauty that still exists, the kind that restores faith in humanity and reminds you that kindness is never wasted.